Please can I welcome you to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee, Thursday the 10th of November. I'm getting ahead of myself. In the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 6:30. My name is Councillor Neil Cutler, Chairperson of the committee. This meeting is audio recorded, live streamed, and will be available on the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available, and advice on how to turn this on is set out on our website. If you're joining us online, please turn camera and microphone off until your item. And everyone, please ensure that mobile phones are on silent. Just reminded myself to do. Lastly, please can I remind members to use the microphones and speak directly into them. Not like I'm doing, keep around. Please do not turn away when speaking to enable your comments to be picked up for the recording of the meeting. In the unlikely event that it's necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. So turning to the agenda, item 1, apologies. I don't think we have any.
No, Chair, thank you.
Item 2, disclosure of interests.
I don't think it appears on the agenda so much, but personal, but non.
Any others? Item 3 then, Chairperson's announcements. The one thing I did want to announce was, normally this committee, we cancelled the committee meeting in September due to the mourning period. I felt that the agenda was limited enough at the last meeting that we would be able to fit it in. But it would have been a very long meeting. We're now in the position where the item for the annual accounts and for the external auditor's report, the external auditors have failed to deliver once again. And so we have, and I have canvassed everybody on the committee, set the meeting for the 15th of December for those two items and those two items alone, which will give us probably a greater opportunity to really good look at the accounts. Liz has normally done a sort of pre-meeting for the annual accounts and walkthrough, and we could do that, but given that we have only those two items on the agenda, in discussion, we felt that actually if we started at the normal time at 6:30, we can do it at that point rather than coming in earlier. I don't know if anyone's got any strong views on that. So if you're happy, we'll start at the normal time of 6:30, but we'll have a thorough walkthrough of the annual accounts, and then we'll give EY a hard time for delaying getting the accounts done. Okay. Well, making a presumption that we feel the need to EY as there are, given the vast increase in fees that have been looked like happening for the re-engagement side of things, I think we will expect a better service in the future. Okay, we'll move on to the to item 4, which is to note the Audit and Governance Work Programme. Are there any questions on that? Duly noted. Item 5, the minutes of the previous two meetings, the 29th of June and the 21st of July. Does anyone have any they wish to raise on those minutes? Are we happy to agree them? Thank you very much. have no members of the public who pass by item 6 and move on to item 7, which is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Monitoring 22-23, 19 to 34, and we have Alan Pitcher from Hampshire County Council, who, as you know, Hampshire County Council look after our Treasury management. So he's here to answer any questions. Richard, do you?
Chair, Alan will introduce as well.
Alan will introduce. Thank you very much, Alan.
Yes, thank you. Yes, this is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Monitoring Report. So the Council has adopted the key recommendations of the SIPFA Code of Practice, and the purpose of this report is to meet this obligation by providing an update on the performance of the Treasury Management function. So this report covers the period from April to September. All Treasury activity has complied with the Council's Treasury Management Strategy, the investment strategy, all relevant statutes, guidance and accounting standards. For the period, the net borrowing went down by 5.3 million. This was due to an increase in investment balances rather than a reduction in borrowing. And this is mainly due to timing differences between grants received and associated spending. The Council held borrowing in the period of 166.7 million, most of which relates to the financial settlement of the HRA in 2012. Investment balances range between 37 million and 65.9 million in the period. In delivering returns, the increase in the bank rate in the period to 2.25% has resulted in improved returns on liquid investments. However, income from investments continued largely to come from investment in pooled funds. These investments fell considerably in value during the coronavirus pandemic, but have since recovered very well, reflecting improved market sentiment. In benchmarking, the Council has compared relatively favourably with other local authorities. And then the final thing to mention would be that the Council will be adopting the recommendations of the Treasury Management Code. These changes will be implemented from April 20, and it will increase the frequency of Treasury Management reporting and will now include the liability benchmark as a Treasury Management.
Thank you, Alan. Questions? Councillor Godfrey.
Sorry, yes, I don't actually have the repayment dates to hand, but I can kind of provide that.
When the debt was when the borrowing was secured in 2012, it was spread over a range of periods and a range of amounts. Just a quick question, really, for Alan. If that's what highlighted in section 21, really, is that those when debt is coming up for. As regards to a specific question, Councillor Godfrey, if we can chat that offline.
Yeah, so our bail-in limits, was something to note, they're more kind of limits, so it's kind of about kind of getting the right balance. So an increase in bail-in, whilst riskier, actually allows us to provide kind of more diversification within the portfolio. So something like the money market funds and that kind of thing, we're exposed to bail-in risk. However, having it split across different investments kind of provides us another layer of protection. Also with those bail-inable investments tend to be in very short-term accounts. So these are the overnight accounts and the notice accounts and that kind of thing. So whilst there is a bail-in risk, it's actually relatively minimal.
mentioned that the diversification. Are you actually dominantly?
Yeah, so the unsecured are mostly on certificates of deposit and that type of.
Has the forecast for the current year income investments increased over the?
I think that's an answer.
Yeah, a summary of that position is set out in the medium-term financial strategy report, which is due to be considered by Cabinet on next Tuesday.
Councillor Atchwell.
Quite a few through the paper and I can't find it. For example, is DLU. Seven DMA DF.
I can address that. So that's a debt management officer. That acronym is.
Bills will be limited. Bills are not. I have a question.
Was for average bill, so it does refer to average bill in the previous part of the paragraph. But yeah, in terms of 27, was it? Yes, this is advice we've taken off of management advisors. I don't kind of have any further details on that at the moment, but I've not.
I understand the retention. Okay, do we have any?
It does.
Well, we will make sure. Hold on. But this was. So, yes, not all the papers. Yes, we seem to be out of habit.
Yeah, just one further question, if you don't mind, Chair. Into 2.8. Can you just clarify? It says in here the UK economy already appears to be in recession.
As in, if it's currently in recession, you mean? I don't believe it is currently in recession, but the advice is it's showing signs of.
Further question?
the obvious rise in derivative issue. And I wonder to what
So yeah, so I think a lot of the issues were around LDIs, I think is what it would be about. We weren't exposed to that in any way, so it was.
it was really that the press speculated.
I think that'll be a matter of when we actually come to management. A meeting in the new year. We will annually. I think it is quite explicit that we don't. Okay, I've been asking everyone to speak up, and I think Alton, you might realise that part of the problem, if you that way, it doesn't come through particularly enough volume for those listening online. You actually need it about. Right, so do we have any further questions? Any debate on this paper? In which case, we'll move to the recommendation, which happy to note the report. And one other thing I'd like to add is that the Arling Close and presentation on state of the economy. There are our advisors on treasury management. Is always a useful session to attend. And Monday morning, we would be notified. Well worth. Okay, move to the next item. Oh, sorry, thank you, Alan. Much appreciated for your presentation and for coming over, because I know, fortunately, we made sure you were first on the agenda, so you could get away. Thanks very much. So we'll move to item 8, which is the final report and pay policy statement for 23-24. And Rob O'Reilly will present the report.
Under the relevant legislation, the Council must update and publish a pay policy statement in April each regular report. Report and accompanying pay policy statement are attached to the report for approval by A&G before ratification by spring. Before I take any questions, I would like to invite the committee to consider one change to the pay policy. And please turn to page 5, paragraph 4.3. There, that I've written that where the council's monitoring officer or section 151 officer is not a chief officer, special responsibility allowance of £3,000 per gross per annum is paid additional requirements of the statutory role. This payment is currently subject to review and benchmarking on whether this additional payment is at an appropriate level. The outcome of this review will be applied from the 1st of 23. We are now in a position to say that we have completed that review with help from South Employers and concluded that £3,000 is not at an appropriate level. I'd like to suggest with the Chief Executive that that figure is increased to 6,000. If that can be agreed by the committee now, then we can do that. So probably best to stop there and see if there's any discussion around that point. Questions generally about the
Thank you, Rob. Yes, I do think it's important. She will be appointed.
Yeah, look, chief executive is appointed as interim officer on. So,
no, we'll talk on that specific amendment paper first, I think. We brought that up to date because otherwise paper would have to come back to this committee before it. Councillor Miller.
As its recommendation based on logic, yes, we just
really. Next session, one thing. Did receive it.
Is a payment that the case when the statutory officer is not a director. It's not paid to directors. Statutory officers don't have to be a director. The additional duty.
Very good, thank you. So it's not something, it's a number which our system for wondering why it just jumped up. So if this is an old number that's been around used.
yes, I mean the first answer is yes, it has been sitting there for a number of years. Well, needed to use the section 151 as what we do director level. It moves to level 3, then a checked with South Eastern Players and we're paying is below other countries.
Section 1 key role, legal responsibility that sure that we set. So it's a major additional response at director level. Previous, how far back we go, there has been a section 1.5. Not a, right now.
My predecessor, Joseph Holmes, was director, so we received the payment. His predecessor, Alexis, did receive it. That was when it was.
I'm not in any way challenging the value of a section. Comfortable with doubling an amount.
Say
In
that,
typically
that
wasn't
in
applied.
paying £6,000, we're still paying below another.
Okay, are there any further comments on this? agree that amendment. Okay, questions on the broader paper? Yeah.
Chair, before we go into this, I'm hearing that it's very low sound, so if everybody could really try, I'm sorry about the situation.
I think it's a matter of remembering to turn your microphone
Yeah.
off when you,
Oh, is it?
when you're not speaking. Yeah. Any questions on the paper? The whole, Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In previous years, and it may not have been last year, we were required to specify the differential, the multiplier between the lowest paid group and chief officers in the council. I don't see that multiplier being set up, but within the policy. Similarly, the commitment to living wage, ensure our ongoing accreditation, again, is mentioned in the paper, but not as a commitment within the paper, within the policy. Do these need to be made more explicit so even I can read it?
Chair, my understanding there is that we need to report to the council what highest and lowest, which say is not in the policy statement itself. It's on page 46. I think as long as it's been, which in it, then I think that meets the requirements of the local act. And sorry, what was the second question regarding the foundation living wage?
The living wage, the commitment to a living wage as part of the policy.
Yes, the commitment is correct. That is correct, yeah. It's at 4.4 of the policy that accredited living wage employer.
Councillor Atchwell.
Yes, thank you. Number 46, 4.8.2, mentions what the council makes contribution of 18% to the pension of each member. Could you just let me know how much employees actually contribute? It's not actually mentioned in the paper. How much do employees contribute to their pension? 4.82.
Okay, yeah. Employees contribute to their pension according to their salary level. There's a sliding scale, which is published, I think, on our website. But I can basically the lowest paid people pay. Sliding scale.
Just one more question, and does everyone get the 18% then?
18% is the employer's contribution. So the employer pays 18% for everybody, employees pay less.
Very much.
Are there any further questions? Discussion? Paper? In which case we'll turn to the recommendation, which is that this committee recommends to the council adoption of the paper. Agreed?
There are just a few small typing and consistency of use of capitalisation of council or not that I've discussed with going to they're not a change to the substance, but I just like to see consistency.
Yes, I can confirm that I received do that.
Well, subject to those typographical changes and consistency, James. Are we happy to recommend this council?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Next paper 9 is update on the employee attitude survey and related matters. And again, it's Rob. Thank you very much. Will you?
Okay, thank you,
present?
Chair. So about this time last year, ANG agreed that a task and finish group be set up to discuss workforce matters and more. One outcome from those discussions was that they agreed to undertake an employee attitude survey. That survey took place in June. We're going to obviously report in September, which would have been now seemed quite a long way away, so pleased for that. The results were very positive, however, and I won't read them out to you, but if you look at page 59, paragraph 11.6, you'll see a very brief summary there of results. Very pleasing, the results. At this stage, the results have now already been shared with employees. There's voice about it. We discussed it at our forum, discussed it with Unison, and we discussed it. So these very good set of results are to a certain extent dealt with. ANG also asked HR to outline the benefits offered to employees in the context of a discussion we had about recruitment and retention, and I've added that into this report rather than do it. The list of benefits is set out at page 62, paragraph 12.2, and the report particularly draws attention to the Council's healthcare cash plan of highly valued benefit by employees, and this is not offered by. So there's two sort of bits. One is the employee attitude survey set out for you and with the accompanying report, and also a smaller section which answers your request for information about benefits which you enjoy at the council.
Councillor Bronk.
Excuse me for not necessarily knowing the answer, but the amongst the list we've got employee retail and shopping discounts. Are there discounts for like the Winchester Sport and Leisure Centre, because obviously keeping good health and is very useful for people physically and mental well-being. Is that one of the that a discount benefit that's not listed?
I don't know the answer to that at the moment, but I can find that out. Later to this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Miller.
Is it any particular department, or can't you tell, that aren't totally happy with the training and development and about having the right equipment? I mean, surprised at least 10% of staff don't think they're getting the training they need or the equipment they need. So is there any way of telling it's a particular department, or is it across the whole council?
We broke the results down by department, but the results weren't different enough to answer that question. So the result is across the council. Clearly, there are areas which we need to improve, and I'll be complacent about this survey and recommendations. We've argued that more training and more around the appraisal process is a way to get out, you know, and track down why someone said that through an employee attitude survey, potential and anonymous. So hopefully, you can find out by and engaged in the appraisal process. Say, I'm not getting the training I need, but I need to raise it at the appraisal and development you need.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tend to agree with your summary, but this seems to be a very positive response from staff. I am concerned with questions 10 and 14, where and 10 about the council's attitude towards health and well-being. 10% of workforce don't believe that it's been taken seriously. And question 14, 20% of staff don't believe that changes are being communicated clearly or quickly. Now, these are, to me, seem levels which are of concern. What actions have been taken to address those concerns?
There's ongoing work regarding health and well-being undertaken in terms of training and software from HR. Well-being is something, it's continuous work that we do. As far as the question about employees saying I don't feel that communication about workforce changes is good enough, right, to say that that was one of the results weren't as positive as I liked. I've arranged to have a meeting with Unison about that next week and say, you know, what can we do? Really, whenever we do workforce changes, Unison tend to be us in that. Somehow, we're failing to get that message across to some employees about the changes that are happening. Clearly, not everybody's in Unison, but nonetheless, I'd like to. So that is one of our action points.
Follow up to that. Do you think it's because there have been so many changes the last couple of years, you know, working from home, developing that, moving back to hybrid work, that there is a certain inevitability that communication may not have been as successful as, I mean, obviously there are lessons to learn, and I'm not diminishing the importance of learning the lessons from this, but we have been through quite a level of changing in work practices years, forced by. I wonder if you feel that that might have. I know it's a bit of a.
It is a leading question, but I totally agree in the sense that if there were no changes, this question wouldn't have answered. There have been a lot of changes. Pandemic and that how we communicate with you've got to keep going back to it and saying, can we do ask that question? Okay, even though you might have known you've sent an email to staff, so it might credit. So you make sure you multiply and communicate more than way through more work to be done there, and I think.
Thank you. Going to page 59, 11.5. I used to be on the personnel committee, which obviously we don't have anymore. The last survey that was done was 2018. It would have been useful, I think, in the paper if we could have compared the two surveys. But it was like working here in 2018 compared to now.
Yep, I mean, the 2018 survey, what I wanted to try to do is establish a survey that we can run ourselves going forward, so we can run the same survey next year. We can add further statements to the that we have if we want to. We can add further demographic. If we 2018 survey was for my time, but I think that was a time for so that's why I didn't include.
I've got one more question, if you don't mind, please. So just going to point, I'll just find it again, 11.13 on page 60. Regarding the council's committed to ensuring equality to all work for all its employees. The 23% of those responded were unsure or neither agreed or disagreed. Can you suggest what changes might be taking place regarding equality, diversity and inclusion?
Yes, I mean, recommendation 3 is that we need to focus on how we communicate the work that starting to take off. But clearly, that's going to be size of community. training and learning for employees. So I think that we have recognised that something which we don't want to have to. Again, it's a good thing about these surveys. They do that anyway, but have impetus to get it right.
Thank you.
Councillor Krask.
Yeah, I'm hesitating about asking the question. I might have asked it in the last. Great to see that people love working for the council, don't intend to leave. Sorry, just looking at the chart. That's the overall sense that people are not feeling the need to leave. But then, 45% of people gave comments, and the main issues, number 2, was pay should be higher. I look back at the previous paper. There is the facility responded. Some flexibility within the pay framework. Clearly people are not looking to leave, which is great. But if they come and say the job with higher money, is there anything we can do about that? Or what's our approach in that situation? And I'm not sure I wanted to answer that question, but it's too late now.
Yeah, the issue there is that there was I think it was useful to get that response, because I think there was a feeling that perhaps lots of people were thinking about leaving and we might end up with some kind of retention crisis. About 10% of the employees might leave in the next 12 months, about 10% turnover. So that's kind of not, nobody's expecting to leave too much. So that's a result that I was quite pleased to see. If there had been like 50% of people applying, really worried. The section about market supplements says that we have to be aware that some of our jobs are subject to the cyclical nature of the economy. So some jobs people will be paid more in the private sector at some stages of the economic cycle, leave us, and in those circumstances, pay a market supplement to fill those vacancies that are so. At other times, it goes into recession. A lot of it work for us. We found that with jobs in my previous crash came, jobs that were very hard to fill before were suddenly very easy to fill. So that's why market supplements are a useful way to deal with the problem, because you do have to respond to the need of the market. But our pay policy does give us that if we need to.
Councillor Krask, do you want a follow-up question?
Yeah, I think so. Do you monitor where there might need to be the need to adjust in certain areas based on requests that come through?
Yes, I mean, our main source of information about market supplement might be needed would be if we couldn't fill a post. So sometimes people would say, we've advertised this post twice already, nobody's applied, so HR to see what other councils are paying more than we are, similar job and jobs. So we will always examine, has it been advertised properly, and have we done the recruitment process before we reach to the supplement. Sometimes all the evidence clearly shows that you get that field, add, which is reviewed annually, and changes we can make that person no longer need it, now going to end it. It was a temporary payment.
Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. When we're looking at the churn, break it down.
Can do that. So the turnover figures in an organisation is that you haven't got enough more data there to really make a meaningful comparisons. Council type. Say, well, it seems people who were 20-year service are more likely to leave, or first year of service. So a lot of the stuff that's interesting, but is it valid before we make decisions on it? But we could do that. We could say, well, 10 people have left. Let's look at how careful before they left, or we can actually make any decisions based on that. Short statistics. Yeah, it's always interesting, and it's good to keep the dashboard in that way. So I think.
Are there any further questions from the committee? Councillor Power, did you want to comment on your paper? That I presume you have seen this one.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say that I think it's a tribute to the entire management structure of Winchester Council that we're getting such positive feedback to the employees, especially after the last have been tumultuous for everybody.
Thank you for that comment. Any further debate on the paper? Councillor Krask.
I think I'll probably just agree with Councillor Power in terms of these are very, very good results given the time that we're going through, and congratulations to the council results coming through. So thank you.
That. We'll move to the recommendations then. There are 5. And of course, one of them, 5, is annual survey. Hope next year we'll have some comparison. And you wish me to read all the recommendations? Have all read them? Are you happy to approve them en bloc? I think in this case, for sure, Councillor Power. Are we happy to agree with the recommendations as set out here? Well, this one wasn't amended. The paper as it. Thank you very much, Rob, for those 2 papers. So sorry you were delayed and not able to bring them earlier, but much appreciated your attendance. Thank you. Move to item 10, the risk management strategy review. In Power's paper, I don't know if she wanted to make any initial comments on it before handing to, I don't know if Amy or Liz. Amy's going to take this one.
Chairman, I'd just like to thank those members of the workshop. I would appreciate some feedback on how to improve those. I think that would be all right. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper tonight, the risk management strategy, an overview. And then the resulting action. These actions will be taken. Action plan.
Any questions? Very difficult. End up with any questions. Do we have any? Well, in terms of the if you recall from the last meeting of this committee, we had some discussion about, given the volatility that we're experiencing at the moment, whether there is a risk, an additional risk, that things are moving so fast that we don't reassess risks more quickly enough. Also, there was a little bit of discussion about the compound effect, which is more difficult to understand of if several risks become a problem at the same time. What's the compound effect of that? That I think we also talked about in the workshop as well. And there was some discussion as to whether, because some of the risks appear in the quarterly reports, in the quarterly monitoring reports that go to the performance panel. Yes, the reports that go to the performance panel, and then on to scrutiny, whether there needs to be some discussion with scrutiny as to what their role on this is, and I've spoken to both Councillor Horrell and Councillor Brooke about this. I don't want to create additional work or additional committee time because the performance panel has a fairly major job anyway, and scrutiny has a function, but I would also suggest it's one of the areas where we can get more councillors having to look closely at risk. So I will continue those discussions along with Amy and Liz as to where we go with that. Well, if there are no questions, I've given you plenty of time to think of them. We'll move to the recommendations. The recommendation is that the Audit and Governance Committee notes the contents of the report. Are you happy to note the content, given that no one's made any comment on it? I imagine we will have to note the report with no additional recommendations. Are you happy? Okay. Thank you very much, Amy. Sorry that we didn't test your knowledge to a greater extent. We'll move to item 11, which is the combined Q1 and Q2 governance monitoring reports, which who's going to present that one? Oh, Ellen is presenting this one because Nelson, our regular presenter of these reports, is on holiday. So we mustn't give Ellen too much of a hard time.
Much appreciated. Good evening, everybody. I'm here to introduce the Q1 and 2 combined report to you this evening. As you're aware, this report shows us the progress against internal audit. Allows you to review the progress, audit, raise any questions or clarification. The report sets out declarations of gifts and hospitality. It shows us the number of limited, reasonable and substantial assurances over the years. I've had 5 internal audit reports finalised and issued before the 30th of September. Are comprised item 12.3. The report then goes on to take us through overdue audit actions. This time we have 18 on a par with 17 in the last meeting. 5 of these are priority actions. It also refers to code of conduct complaints and but before we move through the paper. So Councillor Bronk raised a question earlier this week about the risk CR007 appendix 4 of the report. what Councillor rightly picked up was that the original risk rating hadn't been updated and only residual risk. And he asked if this could be right. This was an error, and Appendix 4, CR007, should also show the original risk, unlikely to likely, resulting in an overall change in the original risk. But I'd clarify that point, Councillor Brown. And as back.
Thank you, Alan. And we have Anthony here as well. If he we'll start with the internal audit side of things. Did you want to make any comment on the internal audit before we move to questions?
I'd rather comment after debate.
I just wondered if Anthony wanted to make any comments as well.
Only that actually the appendix just sort of details where we are in terms of delivering the internal audit plan. Things naturally, as they do, are still moving on. So there's been quite a few more reports issued since the date of the report, the end of September, and we're making good progress through the plan. Happy to take any questions on any of the detail if there are.
So we'll begin with questions on the internal audit reports on which are. Next one is the action plan update. Well, have we got any questions on the main report first? Krask. Yeah.
Just as interesting, well, it's around the declarations of hospitality. Just looking at members' declarations, strikes me about a day ticket to Foodies Festival being over £50. Just wondering why there was not more declarations. Is that typical? What's typical for member declarations of gifts?
Very rarely any at all, I think. My recollection over the years, Councillor Powell.
Trip on the Royal Scot. Great difficulty.
And Councillor Godfrey for as many years as cabinet. It is generally a very low number.
Just to confirm that this report is a typical position. You know, there's nothing unusual there, or there may be times when we see spikes declarations, but typically this is what we would see. Noting that this is obviously a 6-month report. Look at it quarterly.
Questions on start with still the main body. Well, we have no questions on the main aspects of the internal audit, main body of the. So the action plan update, Appendix 1. Do we have any questions? The internal audit progress report, Appendix 2. Councillor Bronk.
Where we have the draft report issued in June, and we're waiting for knowledge of whether that's being accepted and what the recommendations are, etc., for end of September. Can you say whether or not you struggle to get draft reports agreed, or whether that's an extraordinary sort of length of time for which that it takes to have a draft report agreed? I'd like to be able to say maybe that this committee recommends a target turnaround, after which the ELB should look to press management to provide you with a response or to provide reasons for the inability to provide a response.
Generally, it's not too much of an issue getting reports discussed and agreed. Sometimes if they're a bit contentious, it can take a little bit of debate. I'm pleased to note that 2 of the reports that were issued back in May were finalised. That have now been finalised. With the 2 IT reports, I think we've struggled with getting a response for some actions, but I believe there's now an interim head of IT, and he's agreed to take those forward. With the other IT report, it's just waiting sort of senior management team sign off. So they are progressing, but sometimes a little bit slowly.
So without looking to put words in your mouth too much, are you satisfied with the support that you're receiving from senior management?
Always. Sometimes the delays can be with the senior management team signing off the reports, because obviously things crop up and they are very busy, but we do regularly escalate and liaise with the team, and generally that sort of resolves things, but occasionally one does get stuck in the system for longer than like, but it's not a general consistent problem.
I mean, as I understand it, always worked on the principle report, and then there is discussion about the action points, and sometimes I think in the past there was the process of actually saying these are the action points, whereas now they're negotiated action points of what's practical and what the timescale is, so presumably that always takes some time. Obviously as a committee we'd be concerned if you felt that that was taking too long. I'm sure you'd report to us. It sounds from your answer that you're quite happy.
Yeah. In general, the odd one can take a long time, but generally the way we approach our work, we'll issue a draft report with our observations and what we feel are the risks that need to be addressed. It's then down to the management team to come up with what actions they propose to take to address the risk or accept the risk in some instances, the timescales for implementation, and who's going to be responsible for implementations. It then goes to the senior management team once that draft report's been to make sure that they're also happy with the actions. So it's a 2-stage process. This microphone's dipping out.
I think it's just sometimes if you get too close, it's finding the happy medium.
Yes, well, I mean, there was a point history of this concerns that we were that the timescales agreed, some of the action points were overly optimistic. Do you feel we've generally got that right now? The numbers seem to be far more consistent as how many outstanding actions there are. We'd obviously like to reduce the number of outstanding actions as much as possible, but they are really based on the agreement of the timescale. Do you still feel that they're occasionally rather optimistic?
It's quite difficult for us to say. So if the officers think they could do something by a certain timescale, I think we challenge more if we feel that the timescales are too long. If someone thinks they can do something in a reasonable time frame, they have a better handle on their capacity. But obviously, we would like that challenge from the senior leadership team. If they feel something's unrealistic, then sometimes that can contribute to the delays, or if they feel that the action isn't appropriate, then they'll give that level of challenge. So sometimes that can be some of the reasons. Optimistic timescale, I'd rather the timescales are realistic, because they're not then being reported back to the committee as overdue if they were just overly optimistic to begin with.
Yeah.
Chair, I would just echo that final point of that Mr. Harvey's just made. One of the main focuses of the senior management review of draft audits is around the deliverability of the action plan. We are seeing consistent agreement on actions, which is good. So there's not much dispute on the recommended actions, but there is still an element of we have to weigh up. Is that a realistic delivery time? If anything, we are pushing back, but quite rightly, Mr. Harvey says he has to take a view whether that's reasonable to the degree of the risk. What you are seeing in this report is far fewer high priority actions out. That has to be the focus.
Well, for many years it was, a key focus of this committee and pages and pages. Bottom down, we don't. Good. For getting to that. Any further questions on internal audit? Any comments on it? No comments on it? Make. We'll move to, therefore, to Appendix 3, which is Code of Conduct complaint. List here. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Atwell.
Yeah. Just looking at the list, we've got the cases from 2020 years on. Wondered reasons.
We don't have the monitoring officer here, but I don't know if Ellen can shed any light.
So my understanding is there was a particularly large volume, and we are satisfied that these deputy monitoring large number.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Bronk.
I apologise, Chair. I forgot at the time of disclosure of interest that I do have an interest in the progression of one of these complaints, in much the same way that Councillor Coppy used to report his interest. Also announced mine. I shan't refer to which one it is. I'm simply keen to ensure that all of them the benefit of all the complainants to know that their concerns are being resolved and taken seriously. I think that's we must have at the back of our minds, that it's not just those complaining out, but those making a complaint that wish to see these things handled effectively and fairly.
Certainly, I've been assured by the monitoring officer who was due to leave the council in September has stayed on purely as monitoring officer in order to clear the backlog of these complaints. As I understand it, I think further 7 came in August and September, which means that we do seem to have gone through a period, particularly where parish councils, where there has been quite an increase in effect of online meetings. Difficulties of COVID lockdowns have seemed to have created problems for a lot of people. Any other comments on this section of the report? Councillor Godfrey, yes.
If I may make a comment. Where turbulent period in the past. I'd like to commend the progress made in order and relative speed in solving these ways are very difficult and contentious. And that yes, a structured
I think we should also note that the newly appointed director, the monitoring officer, is very experienced as a monitoring officer, which is one of the key factors in. But I think it is only fair. He starts with a relatively clean slate. I don't all be cleared by them, but one would hope they're all in a position where it's easy for her to take them on. Okay, we'll move on to the to Appendix 4 then. Having noted the Bronk had made risk register, are there any other questions? Corporate risk register. Deafening silence. Okay, as the paper as a whole, do we have any further comments? Must be getting something right. Councillor Bolton.
Chair, I do have a quick question. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the risk management session that you had. But I have spent 30 years in risk. So one of the things I was curious about was whether you look at sort of the black swan type issues and look to see where Roosevelt call it the unknown unknowns. What do you do about that?
Who would like to take the answer? Who knows the unknown unknowns?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not going to. But I will just reassure committee. Register go. Yeah, we do. Planning of. And that would be.
Thank you. We need to be assured of, I suppose, is how quick our response time is when an unknown becomes a known unknown. But once we become aware of it, how quickly is the response? And is there a mechanism that if something comes up, things are reviewed quicker than the quarterly review? I think that's the important question.
I think an example of that, Chair, is the change that we've noted in this register, where obviously in the extremely volatile current economic climates, we are reflecting a significant increased risk on the council's finances. We have mitigation in place, but not sufficient yet to reassure us to bring that risk down. So the focus on that is a daily focus, to address how we address those longer term. We're forecasting longer term deficits, and we need to continue to work to address those. We certainly won't be waiting until the next quarter to think how we're doing it.
Councillor Crusk.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at CR 007 on page, obviously important risk, lack of sufficient funding, medium term. Done some things to mitigate that risk. Looks like it's made it worse. Oh, that's the point you made before. Very good. It's not worse. Where does that dot sit now?
Original risk rating. That one should.
So the original risk rating is red. Your risk is red.
That was the point that Richard's just made, that the mitigation is not sufficient to move it yet. Being worked. So currently, there is some mitigation in place, enough to move it into the out of the red. Yep.
Chair, yes, that's right.
Good. That proves that I do understand it. Any further comments on the paper as a whole? Recommendations? Oh, sorry, Councillor Power, I should have given you the opportunity to comment on your paper.
That's quite right, Chair. Thank you. I'm always comforted by the internal. I find quite often that it's an endorsement of the action that the officers wanted to take anyway, which is useful. It gives them the authority to implement that. Regarding unknown unknowns, I think we've all met them, and usually we find that one of the plans we made for the known risks can be adapted in most cases. But we do operate on many, many fronts. Risks that officers are very competent meeting those when they but I'm not trying to leave it open as a I don't like the level of outstanding code of conduct complaints, but I have progress as can be made. It is a tortuous process, but it does have to be done properly, and we are doing it properly.
Thank you, Councillor Power. And we could have a broader discussion about, I was thinking about unknown unknowns that we may have come across. In fact, the definition comes really tight on it. COVID was not a unknown unknown, it was a known unknown. It wasn't included in any of the plans. But nationally, not in ours, but nationally, and that's a great example really, because the flu plan was there, but not the COVID, not one for SARS. And that's actually an example of one that possibly wasn't adapted quickly enough. But that I'm sure will all come out in the eventually to us. Okay. If there are no further questions on this paper, thank you for all the officers, Amy, and Liz. The recommendation is that we note the report. Are we happy to note the report? Move to the final. The monitoring officer annual report. Now, this is one that really does suffer from the fact that we cancelled the previous meeting. Monitoring officer Lisa circulated an email to the committee because she was unable to attend tonight, asking for questions on the report. She received no questions from members of the committee, but if there are any further, further questions, because there can't be from nothing. If there are any questions from the committee here and now, we can pass them on. So, anybody got anything they wish to raise on the monitoring officer's report? Therefore, I ask that we, as a committee, note the report. And I think the one comment is, based on the previous one, we would like to see, we hope and we wish her well in trying to clear the backlog of reports before January. There is one element to this report that, again, we need to start considering, and that is there is mention in there of a constitution review. It was always intended there'd be a light touch review of the constitution when the new constitution was put in place in 2019, I think, in early 2019. The main that really needs reviewing is, of course, the fact that we introduced the policy committees at that stage, and there needs to be a review of how they're working. There are one or two other areas that a constitutional review panel, which will be set up, I think, in the new year, to look at. As I say, not a very detailed, over-the-top review of the Constitution, but actually looking at one or two aspects. I think one of the other aspects that we're quite keen, or several members have mentioned they're keen to look at, is whether the Budget Council should have a slightly special status to try to minimise the length of it, removing any other business from it. And I think there's one other element that Councillor Becker, oh yes, the Joint Planning Committee at West Waterlooville. There are one or two question marks around that. And of course, the biggest thing really, which is to bring in the new Code of Conduct into the Constitution. So that's something that panel will be put in place and bring recommendations firstly to this committee and to council for ratification. Okay, well, thank you everybody for all your contributions this evening. I think it's been a good meeting. I'm forward to seeing you all on December the 15th for a very detailed look at the annual accounts and beating up the auditors. No, I didn't say that.